Folks say silence is golden, but in the summer of 1895, my silence nearly cost a woman her life. This here's the story of how I learned to speak. The cabin sat quiet on that May morning in 1918, too quiet the way places get when death is settling in. I lay on the narrow bed I'd built with my own hands 23 years back, the same bed where Claire had nursed me through winters and summers, through good times and harder ones. My breath came shallow now, each one a victory over the coal dust that had finally claimed my lungs. The boy sat beside me. Henry. My grandson, 17 years old, with his whole life stretching before him like an unmapped trail. Tomorrow he'd board the train east. Tomorrow he'd sail for France in the trenches in a war that was eating young men like kindling in a fire. His eyes held fear he was trying to hide the way young men do when they're pretending to be brave. "Grandpa," he said, his voice cracked, still caught between boy and man. "Before I go, is there anything you want to tell me? Any advice?" I tried to sit up, couldn't manage it. Claire's hand on my shoulder, gentle but firm. 73 years old, same as me, but her touch still had that healing quality, still had that strength that had kept our little school running all these years, kept hope alive in children who might otherwise have had none. "Help him up," she said to Henry. "Let him tell it proper." They propped me against the headboard. The movement brought a coughing fit that lasted near a minute. Blood on the cloth when it passed. Not much time left now. We all knew it. "There's something you need to know," I told the boy. "Something about silence and speaking and the cost of both. About when to hold your tongue and when to let words fly, even if they cost you everything." Henry leaned forward. Outside, morning birds were making their usual racket. Inside, the cabin held its breath. "It was 1895, I said. "I was 50 years old that summer. Living alone in these mountains, hadn't spoken more than a few words to another soul in near 8 years. I thought silence was my strength, my refuge, my fortress against a world that had already taken too much from me." I paused, gathering what remained of my strength. I was wrong. And that summer, a woman came out of the forest like a wounded deer, and my silence almost kills you. Almost killed us both. The boy settled back. Claire squeezed my hand, and I began to tell them about that August morning when everything changed. The name Samuel Hewitt, though most folks who remember me at all call me Sam. Back in the summer of 1895, I was 50 years old and living alone in a cabin high in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. The cabin sat in a clearing I'd carved out myself 8 years before, surrounded by oak and pine and hemlock, so thick you couldn't see it unless you knew exactly where to look. That suited me just fine. The cabin was simple. One room maybe 20 feet square, built from logs I'd felled and notched with my own hands. The roof was wood shingles I'd split and laid myself waterproofed with pine pitch that filled the air with its sharp, clean scent every time the sun hit it hot. A stone chimney rose from one side, smoke drifting lazy from the top most mornings when I had the fire going. Inside, sparse. A bed in the corner with a patchwork quilt my mother had made 40 years back. A rough-hewn table where I took my meals. Shelves holding my few possessions. A tin of cornmeal, dried venison wrapped in cloth. A box of ammunition for the Winchester rifle that hung on pegs above the door. And there on the high shelf, gathering dust, a pair of women's button boots. Small, delicate, out of place in that rough bachelor cabin. On the table sat a tin cup with a letter scratched into it, worn almost smooth from years of use. The letter K for Catherine, for Kate, for my wife who had walked out of my life 8 years ago and never looked back. I kept the boots in the cup not out of hope but out of penance. Daily reminders of my failure, of my silence when I should have spoken, of my stillness when I should have moved. That August morning started like any other. I woke with first light, built up the fire from last night's coals, made coffee strong enough to strip paint. Ate leftover cornbread from the day before, chewing slow, while watching dawn break over the eastern ridges. The silence in that cabin was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. After breakfast, I took up my double-bit axe and went outside to the woodpile. Winter was still months off, but a smart man prepares. I'd learned that in the coal mines back before everything went wrong. In the mines, the men who lived were the men who thought ahead, who didn't wait for trouble to show its face before getting ready to meet it. The morning was already warm, promising a hot day ahead. Mist still clung to the valleys below, burning off slow as the sun climbed higher. The axe felt good in my hands, familiar, honest. I set a round of oak on my chopping block and swung. The blade bit deep with a satisfying crack that echoed off the mountainsides. Another swing, another crack. The rhythm of it was meditative, comforting. The world reduced to the simple cycle of lift, swing, split, lift, swing, split. I'd been at it maybe half an hour when I heard it. A splash, down by the creek. I stopped mid-swing, the axe frozen above my shoulder. My ears, sharpened by 8 years of mountain solitude, caught something that didn't belong. Not the regular sounds of the forest, not deer coming to drink, not bear looking for fish. Something else. Human. I lowered the axe slow, listening hard. There it was again. Ragged breathing. The crack of a branch underfoot. The unmistakable sound of something heavy moving through brush. Moving clumsy. Moving. Desperate. The Winchester hung on the cabin wall too far to reach. I had my Bowie knife on my belt. That would have to do. I moved toward the creek, boots crunching on last autumn's leaves still thick on the ground. The creek ran clear and cold over smooth stones, maybe 15 feet across at this point, shallow enough to wade in most places. And there, collapsed against the trunk of an old maple tree, was a woman. Not just any woman, a nun. Her black habit was torn at the shoulder, streaked with mud and what looked like dried blood. The white coif that should have framed her face hung loose and crooked, revealing dark brown hair matted with sweat and bits of leaves and forest debris. Her feet were bare cut and bleeding, the kind of damage that comes from running hard over rough ground without stopping to care about pain. In her arms, clutched against her chest like a child might hold a beloved doll, was a black leather ledger. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Green eyes wide with terror. Not the kind of fear that comes from seeing a snake or hearing thunder. The kind that comes from being hunted by something that wants you dead. I stood there maybe 10 feet away and did what I'd always done. I looked. I assessed. I calculated. How far had she run? How badly was she hurt? Who was chasing her? How much danger was I about to invite into my carefully maintained solitude? In the coal mines, talking got you killed. A shout could bring down loose rock. A warning yelled too loud could cause a cave-in. Better to watch, to listen, to think before you acted. Silence had kept me alive underground for 20 years. But I looked too long. Her voice came out broken, barely more than a whisper. Don't look at me like that. The words hit me like a fist to the gut. I realized what my stare must look like to her. A big man alone in the woods, standing over a terrified woman. Beard, wild face, weathered hands scarred from decades of hard labor. Silent, staring. Assessing her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person in desperate need of help. I took a step back, hands rising slow where she could see them. I ain't going to hurt you, sister. My voice came out rough. 8 years of mostly silence will do that to a man's throat. I cleared it, tried again. You're safe here, I promise. She didn't move, just stared at me with those wide green eyes trembling like a leaf in a storm. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the ledger. I looked down at myself, saw what she was seeing. Dirty work shirt sleeves rolled up to show arms thick with muscle and covered in old scars from mine accidents. Hands calloused and rough, the kind that could break bone if they wanted to. A Bowie knife as long as my forearm hanging from my belt. I probably looked exactly like the kind of man she'd been running from. Without a word, I shrugged out of my buckskin jacket, moved slow, deliberate, making sure she could track every movement. I laid the jacket on a flat rock about 3 paces from where she huddled, then turned my back completely. Gave her privacy, gave her the choice. Put it on, I said to the trees. I ain't looking. For a long moment, nothing. Just the sound of the creek and her ragged breathing and a jay calling somewhere in the pines above. Then I heard movement, the rustle of leather, a small gasp of pain as she tried to stand. It's done, she whispered. I turned back slow. She'd wrapped the jacket around herself, and even though it swallowed her small frame, she looked a little less like a hunted thing, a little more like a person. I pulled the canteen from my belt, the one I always carried when working outside, leather-wrapped and still cool from being filled at dawn with fresh creek water. I uncapped it and set it on the same rock where the jacket had been, then stepped back again, giving her space. giving her control. Drink, you need it. She reached for it with shaking hands. The first swallow went down wrong, and she coughed, water spilling down her chin. But she tried again, slower this time. I watched her throat work as she drank, watched color start to come back to her lips. When she lowered the canteen, our eyes met. That's when I saw it. The ring of pale skin on my left ring finger where a wedding band used to sit. My hand had been on the canteen, and now it was in clear view between us. Her gaze fixed on it. Something changed in her face. Not fear anymore. Something worse. Despair. You're married, she said, not a question, a statement of fact. And in those two words, I heard a whole story. Heard her thinking that a married man wouldn't help a strange woman alone in the woods. That I'd send her away to protect my reputation, my marriage, whatever I thought I had to lose. That she was alone in this. I looked at my hand like I'd forgotten about the mark. Truth was, I never forgot. That pale band of skin was a daily reminder of my own silence, my own failure. Was, I said, maybe still am. It's complicated. I didn't explain more. Didn't tell her about Kate or the mine accident or the 8 years of silence. Some stories were too heavy for first meetings. Can you walk? I asked. She tried to stand. Her legs buckled immediately. I moved without thinking, catching her before she hit the ground. She weighed nothing. Light as a child despite being a grown woman. Through the jacket I could feel her ribs, sharp, prominent. When had she last eaten a proper meal? Cabin's just over the rise, I said. Quarter mile. I'll carry you if you let me. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. And when I lifted her in my arms, she didn't fight, just rested her head against my shoulder and closed her eyes like she'd been running so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. I carried her home in silence. Yeah, the cabin's single room was dim after the bright morning sun, lit only by the fire I'd banked before going out to chop wood. The coals still held heat. I set her down gentle in the rocking chair near the hearth, the same chair Kate used to sit in on cold evenings reading by firelight from the few books we own. I set about building up the fire. The wood caught quick. I'd learned long ago to keep good kindling dry. Soon flames were crackling, pushing back the morning chill that still lingered in the corners. She watched me as I worked. I could feel her eyes taking in the cabin, the simple bed with its worn quilt, the rough table, the shelves with my few possessions, the Winchester above the door. And there on that high shelf where I thought she might not notice those women's button boots gathering dust like a shrine to failure. I fetched a clean cloth from my trunk and dunked it in the water basin, wrung it out and set it on the arm of the chair, close to her, but not touching. Still giving her space, still letting her choose. For your wounds, I said, I got bandages if you need them. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice was getting stronger. That was good. I'd busied myself at the table putting distance between us. Pulled out some dried venison and the leftover cornbread from the tin box where I kept my stores. Set a kettle of water on the hook over the fire for tea. You got a name? I asked, keeping my back turned, giving her space to answer or not, as she chose. A pause. Then Claire, Sister Claire Whitmore. Samuel Hewitt, folks call me Sam. You live alone, Mr. Hewitt. For some time now. The kettle started to hiss. I pulled it off the heat and dropped in some dried peppermint leaves from my herb box. The smell filled the cabin clean and sharp, cutting through the smoke and sweat and fear. I poured the tea into a tin cup. Kate's cup. The one with the case scratched into it, worn almost smooth from 8 years of my thumb, rubbing over it like I could somehow bring her back through sheer repetition. Sister Claire saw it when I handed it to her. Your wife's? She asked quietly. She left it behind. Claire wrapped both hands around the cup like she was trying to pull all the warmth in the world into her body. She stared into the tea for a long moment. Then she looked up at me, really looked at me. And I saw her seeing me different now. Not as a threat, as a person. I must look like I've been dragged through the devil's own brambles, she said. There was the smallest hint of something in her voice. Not quite humor, but trying. I thought about that, about devils and brambles. About this woman who'd run through the mountains barefoot, clutching that leather ledger like her life depended on it, which it probably did. Ain't no devils up here, I said, just bears. It wasn't a joke exactly, just a fact. But something about the way I said it, the absolute matter-of-fact delivery, made her lips twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. And then she did something that surprised me. She laughed. It was small, broken, mixed with something that might have been a sob, but it was a laugh. I hadn't heard laughter in this cabin in 8 years. The sound was strange, foreign, but good, real good. "Thank you," she said again softer this time, "for not asking questions." "When you're ready," I said. She nodded, sipped her tea. Some of the tension left her shoulders. We sat there quietly for a while. Not the heavy stillness I was used to. Something different. Something shared. Outside, a jay called from the pines. The fire popped and settled. And for the first time in 8 years, I didn't feel quite so alone. After a spell, I stood and went to the shelves. Pulled down an old wooden box I kept there, the one that held the few papers I'd managed to keep over the years. Inside was a map, hand-drawn by old Jake Stone years back when he was teaching me the territory. Every ridge, every creek, every game trail marked in careful detail. I unfolded it on the table. Sister Claire set down her cup and stood. Steadier now. She came to the table and I saw her eyes go sharp as she studied the map. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it, something else was emerging. Intelligence. Careful thought. "You drew this?" she asked. "Can't draw," I admitted. "Can't read neither. Old friend made it for me." Her finger traced one of the lines. "This mark here, it's the old logging road, isn't it? The one that leads to Harlan Springs." I looked closer. She was right. I'd never paid much attention to that particular trail, having no need to go to town. "If they're looking for me," she said, and her voice had changed now, steadier, thinking, "they'll use that road. It's the only wagon path wide enough for horses." She was smart, real smart. And she was starting to think like someone who needed to survive, not just someone running scared. "Where else might they come from?" I asked. She studied the map and I studied her. The way her eyes moved, calculating. The way her finger traced possible routes. This wasn't just some helpless woman who'd gotten herself in trouble. This was someone with a mind that worked. "Here," she said, pointing to a gap in the ridges to the east. "And here, these are the only ways to reach this area without climbing. The high passes are still too dangerous this time of year." "You know maps," I said. "I was taught to read at the orphanage. Maps, books, letters. The church believed in education." She paused. "At least they used to." There was a story in those words, a painful one, but I didn't push. Evening came on slow. The light through the cabin window turned gold, then orange, then purple. I lit the oil lamp and hung it from its hook. The shadows danced on the log walls, making the small room feel even smaller. Sister Claire had been quiet for the last hour. I'd given her the rocking chair again, and she'd curled up in it with my jacket still wrapped around her, staring at the fire like she could read answers in the flames. I was starting to think she might not tell me, might just rest and then move on at first light, and I'd never know what she was running from or why that black leather ledger was worth dying for. Then she spoke. "I need to show you something." She reached into her habit, into some hidden pocket, and pulled out the ledger I'd seen her clutching by the creek. It was small, maybe 6 inches by 8, bound in black leather that had been fine once but was now water-stained and worn. She set it on the table between us. "This is why they want me dead." I looked at it, but didn't touch. Waited. "Evidence," she said, "of theft, of lies, of a man who uses God's name to do the devil's work." She opened it. The pages inside were covered in neat handwriting. Columns of numbers, dates, descriptions. I couldn't read the words, but I could recognize numbers when I saw them. Red oak, 200 board feet, $45. Black walnut, 150 board feet, $38. On and on, page after page. "This timber," I said slowly, my finger hovering over the entries. "This is from public land, ain't it?" She nodded. "From the Monongahela National Forest. It's illegal to cut there without permits. And Father Nathaniel has no permits." Father Nathaniel. So it was a priest she was running from, a man of God who was anything but. "You found this?" I asked. I was cleaning his office. The floorboard was loose. It was hidden underneath. She closed the ledger, hands shaking harder now. "When he found out, I knew he locked me in the cellar." She paused, and I saw her gathering courage to say the next part. "3 days, Mr. Hewitt. 3 days in the dark with no food, no water. And he told me. Her voice broke. He told me that if I spoke a word, he'd tell everyone I was mad, that I'd lost my mind, that I'd be sent to an asylum. The rage that went through me was hot and sudden. I'd known men like that in the mines. Men who used their power to crush anyone who threatened them. Men who'd let other miners die rather than risk their own positions. Why didn't you go to the law? I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew the answer. Her laugh was bitter. Sheriff Burke eats Sunday dinner at Father Nathaniel's table every week. They're friends. The whole town thinks Father Nathaniel is a saint. Who would believe a disobedient nun over him? I sat back in my chair processing this. A priest, a powerful man, a woman with no one to believe her. It was a familiar story even if the details were new. How'd you escape? The cellar door was old. I worked at it for hours, days maybe. I lost track of time in the dark. Finally, the lock gave. It was night. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. Just away. And you grabbed this. I gestured to the ledger. It's the only proof, the only thing that proves I'm telling the truth. Outside in the growing darkness, I heard something. Faint. Far off. Dogs. Sister Claire heard it too. Her whole body went rigid. They're coming, she whispered. I stood slow, moved to the window, cracked the shutter just enough to peer out into the twilight. Nothing yet, but the dogs were getting closer. Bloodhounds from the sound of them, tracking dogs. I closed the shutter and turned to face her. Listen carefully. Do you trust me? She looked at me for a long moment. This man she'd met only hours ago. This stranger in the wilderness. I don't know, she said honestly, but I don't have a choice, do I? No, ma'am, you don't. I moved fast, then all the careful distance forgotten. Blew out the oil lamp, plunging us into darkness except for the firelight. Banked the fire down to coals. Grabbed the Winchester from above the door and checked the loads. 6 rounds, enough maybe. Stay quiet, I told her, stay low. And no matter what happens, don't make a sound. Through the walls we heard them now. Horses, at least 2, maybe more. The jingle of tack. Men's voices, low and purposeful. They had found my cabin. Sister Claire pressed herself into the corner by the hearth, clutching the ledger to her chest. In the dim red glow of the coals, her eyes were huge. I positioned myself by the door, Winchester ready, but pointed at the floor. And I waited. The voices got closer, stopped maybe 100 yards out. Tracks lead this way. A man's voice rough and hard. She came through here. Old Sam Hewitt lives up here. A different voice, younger. Hermit, probably ain't seen her. We search at first light. The first voice again. Father wants her back before Sunday Mass. Sunday Mass. 2 days away. What if she talks? The younger voice asked. A pause, then the first voice again, cold as winter. Then we make sure no one listens. The horses moved off. The voices faded, but I knew they'd be back. I waited a full hour before I moved, letting the night settle, letting the sounds of the forest return to normal. Finally, I lit the lamp again, keeping it low. Sister Claire hadn't moved from her corner. She was shaking not from cold, but from fear. The kind that comes from knowing men are hunting you, men who will kill to keep their secrets safe. They'll come back, she said, at first light. That gives us till dawn, I said. What do we do? My gaze found hers. This woman who'd run through mountains barefoot, who'd been locked in darkness and threatened and hunted. And I thought about Kate, about how I'd let her leave without a fight, about 8 years of silence and regret, about all the times I should have spoken and didn't. We run, I said, get you to Charleston, to the U.S. Marshal. We make someone listen. Charleston's 3 days through the mountains. I know these mountains better than any man alive. We'll use the old Cherokee Trail. No horses can follow there. She stood up still, clutching the ledger like a lifeline. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. It was a fair question. I thought about it, about Kate and the mine and the years of silence, about all the things I should have said and didn't, about being a man who watched and thought and never spoke up when it mattered. Because somebody should, I finally said, and this time that somebody's going to be me. Through the window, the night pressed close. Somewhere out there, men were waiting for dawn. Men who wanted to silence Sister Claire forever. But they didn't know about the Cherokee Trail, didn't know about old Jake Stone and the maps he'd made, didn't know that a silent man could learn to speak when the stakes were high enough. I looked at Sister Claire, and she looked back at me. And in that moment, we both understood. This wasn't just about running anymore. It was about fighting back, about truth, about finding your voice when the whole world wants you quiet. Get some rest, I told her. We leave before first light. And then because it needed to be said, because silence had cost me too much already, Sister, we're going to make them listen. I promise you that. She nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since I'd found her by the creek. Outside, the night sounds continued. An owl called from the pines. The creek murmured over its stones. And somewhere in the darkness, men waited with poisoned guns and the kind of righteousness that came from never being questioned. But they'd never met Samuel Hewitt, and they'd never met a woman like Sister Claire Whitmore. Come morning, they'd learn. The silence was over. We left 2 hours before dawn when the world was still black and the stars hung like ice chips in the sky. I'd packed light but careful. My leather rucksack held dried venison, wrapped in cloth cornmeal, in a tin container, 2 canteens filled with creek water, fire-making supplies wrapped in oilcloth to keep them dry, and a box of ammunition for the Winchester. Sister Claire carried nothing but the black ledger tucked inside her habit close to her heart, like a talisman against the darkness pursuing us. Before we left, I'd done something I hadn't done in 8 years. I'd climbed up to that high shelf and taken down Kate's old button boots. Dust fell from them like snow. They were too big for Sister Claire's small feet, but I stuffed the toes with strips of cloth torn from an old shirt. They'd do better than bare feet on 3 days of mountain trails that could shred skin down to bone. She'd also changed out of the torn habit. I'd given her an old pair of my work trousers and a flannel shirt from the trunk, where I kept the few things Kate had left behind. The clothes hung loose on her small frame. The trouser legs had to be rolled up 3 times. The shirt sleeves passed her fingertips until she rolled them back. But they'd move easier than skirts through thick brush and over sharp rocks. Standing in my cabin wearing men's clothes, her long, dark hair braided down her back in a simple plait, she looked different. Younger somehow, more vulnerable without the armor of her habit to hide behind. I've never worn trousers before, she'd said, looking down at herself with a mixture of embarrassment and wonder. Her hands smoothed the rough fabric uncertainly. Easier for walking, won't catch on branches or trip you up on rocks. Will God forgive me for dressing like a man? God's got bigger concerns than what you were wearing, I said, like getting you to Charleston alive. She'd nodded at that, accepting the logic, even if it went against everything she'd been taught about proper dress for women. Now we moved through the darkness like ghosts. I led, she followed close behind our feet, finding the path by memory and instinct more than sight. The Cherokee Trail was old. Older than any white settlement in these mountains. Older than my grandparents' grandparents. The native peoples had carved it through the ridges generations back when this land was still theirs, following the natural curves and contours of the earth rather than fighting against them. It was narrow, sometimes no wider than a man's shoulders. In places we had to turn sideways to slip between rock faces that rose sheer on both sides, the stone cold and damp against our backs. In other spots, the trail ran along cliff edges, where one wrong step in the darkness meant a 100-foot drop onto rocks that would break every bone in your body. But no horse could follow this path. That was what mattered. No wagon, no easy pursuit. Behind us, as the sky started to gray with approaching dawn, I heard the dogs wake up. Their baying carried on the still morning air, echoing off the ridges. Deep-voiced bloodhounds trained to track by scent. Brother Daniel and Brother Francis would be saddling their horses about now, following the obvious trail down toward Harlan Springs, the wide path that wagons used. They'd waste half the morning before they realized we'd gone a different way. Maybe more if we were lucky. We pushed hard through the dawn, climbing higher into the mountains where the air got thinner and colder. Sister Claire's breathing came harder as we climbed, her lungs working like bellows. But she didn't complain, just kept putting one foot in front of the other, her jaw set with the kind of determination I'd seen in miners who refused to give up even when the mountain was trying to kill them. The sun rose behind us, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Beautiful if you had time to notice such things. We didn't. We just climbed. Around mid-morning, we stopped at a spring I knew about. Cold water bubbled up from between limestone rocks, clean and sweet. The best water in these mountains. We refilled the canteens and rested on a flat boulder, worn smooth by centuries of weather. Sister Claire's hands were already blistering. I could see the raw patches on her palms where she gripped rocks and branches to pull herself up the steeper sections. Her face was flushed from exertion, sweat dampening her hairline despite the cool mountain air. "How far have we come?" she asked between gulps of water. "Maybe 6 miles as the crow flies. Got about 30 more to Charleston." Her face fell. 6 miles and she already looked exhausted. Her shoulders slumped with weariness. "I can keep going," she said quickly, reading my expression. "Don't think I can't." "I know you can, sister." Wasn't doubting that. We ate some of the dried venison, tearing off strips with our teeth. It was tough as old leather required serious chewing that made your jaw ache, but it gave energy. That's what mattered. After a while, she spoke again. "Tell me about her, your wife." I hadn't expected that question. Hadn't talked about Kate to anyone in 8 years. Hadn't even let myself think about her much, pushing the memories down whenever they surfaced, like keeping a hand pressed on a wound to stop the bleeding. Why'd I asked? Not unkindly, just curious. Because you are helping me, risking your life for me. And I want to know why. I want to understand what drives a man to do what you're doing. Fair enough. She deserved that much, at least. I stared at the spring, watching the water well up from deep in the earth, pure and clean and constant, like it had been doing for 1,000 years and would do for 1,000 more. Her name was Catherine. Catherine Collins before she married me. We married young, both of us just 20. I was working in the coal mines down near Beckley. Hard work, dangerous work, but it paid better than farming. We were saving up for a piece of land, going to build a farm, raise children, live a good life. What happened? The old pain rose up familiar as an old scar that aches when it rains. There was an accident, gas explosion in the mine, killed 12 men. I got out because I was near the entrance when it happened. But Kate, I stopped, the memory heavy as stone in my chest. She breathed the fire damp. We called it that down in the mines, the bad air that comes before an explosion. It damaged her lungs. She started coughing up blood, couldn't breathe right, needed a doctor, a good one, in the city. I picked up a pebble, turned it over in my calloused hand. And I didn't have the money. The company wouldn't pay for treatment, said it wasn't their responsibility, that she hadn't been working in the mine, so they owed her nothing. I told Kate to wait, told her I'd find a way to get the money, told her I'd fix it. Sister Claire was quiet, letting the story settle. But she didn't wait. She waited 6 months. 6 months of getting worse while I scrambled for money that never came. Then one morning I woke up and she was gone. Left a note saying she'd gone looking for her family back east. Said she'd write when she got settled. I never got a letter, never heard from her again. "You didn't go after her?" Sister Claire said. Not a question, just a statement. No. Why not? I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times over 8 years. Asked it in the long mountain nights when sleep wouldn't come. Asked it when I saw Kate's boots on the shelf or her cup in the cupboard. Pride, maybe. Fear, definitely. I kept thinking she'd come back, or that I'd suddenly get the money and go get her and everything would be fine. But the days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, and I just stayed silent. Didn't go after her, didn't write, didn't do anything. Just kept working the mine and coming home to an empty house. That's why you came up here, to the mountains, to be alone. Couldn't stand the mine anymore. Couldn't stand the town where everyone knew my business. Couldn't stand folks asking about Kate with pity in their eyes. So I left, came up here, built the cabin, figured I'd live out my days quiet and alone. Seemed fitting somehow, punishment for my cowardice. "But you're not quiet now," she said. "You're not alone." "No, I'm not." I looked at her, at this woman who'd run through the mountains barefoot rather than stay silent about injustice. Who'd risked everything, lost everything for the truth. "Silence ain't always strength," I said slowly, the words coming hard. "Sometimes it's just cowardice." I told myself I was being patient, being practical, giving Kate space. But really I was just scared. Scared she didn't want me anymore. Scared she'd blame me for not having the money to save her. Scared of facing my own failure. Sister Claire reached out then, just briefly, and touched my hand where it rested on the rock. It was the first time she'd initiated contact with me. The touch was light, barely there, but it felt like absolution somehow. Like forgiveness I didn't deserve but was being offered anyway. "You're not being a coward now," she said softly. "Maybe not, but I was 80 years too late for Kate. All I can do now is try not to be too late for you." We rested another few minutes, letting our breathing return to normal, feeling strength return to our legs. Then we pushed on, climbing higher into the mountains. Around noon, we heard them again. Distant but clear, dogs baying, but not from the direction we'd come from the east. They'd figured it out. Somehow they'd realized we weren't on the main trail and had found the Cherokee Trail. How I thought fast, running through possibilities. They must have tracked us to where we started the trail. Smart, they'd split their forces, some following the main trail to Harlan Springs in case we went that way, the others following us here. "Can we outrun them?" Sister Claire asked, her face going pale with fear. I listened to the dogs. They sounded maybe a mile back, moving fast. And men on foot with nothing to carry could move faster than we'd been moving on this difficult terrain. "No," I said honestly, "but I know these mountains better than they do. Come on." I led her off the trail, pushing through thick pine branches that slapped at our faces and grabbed at our clothes. She followed without question, trusting me even though she couldn't see where we were going. We moved as fast as we could, sacrificing stealth for speed, branches cracking under our boots. After about 100 yards of hard scrambling, I found what I was looking for. A creek, cold and fast-moving, cutting through a ravine. The water was spring runoff from the higher peaks, snowmelt that hadn't seen sun in months. "We're going down there," I said. Sister Claire looked at the drop to the water below. Maybe 15, 20 feet. The creek was narrow but deep, flowing fast over hidden rocks. "Water hides scent. The dogs can't track us through it. It's our only chance." "I can't swim." "I know. That's why you'll hold on to me. Trust me, sister. I won't let you drown." I didn't give her time to argue or think about it or build up fear. Just grabbed her hand and jumped. The cold hit like a physical blow, like being punched in the chest by a giant fist. Mountain water, pure snowmelt, so cold it stopped your breath and made your heart stutter. We went under together, the current immediately grabbing at us, trying to pull us downstream and dash us against the rocks. I felt Sister Claire's hand clamp down on mine like a vice, her grip powered by pure terror. Her other hand grabbed my shirt, fingers digging in so hard I felt her nails through the cloth. I kicked hard, pulling us both toward the surface, my boots filled with water dragging at my legs like lead weights. We broke the surface together. Sister Claire came up gasping, coughing, eyes wide with terror and shock. From the cold. Her face had gone white, lips already turning blue. "I got you," I said, though my own teeth were starting to chatter. "Trust me, just hold on." I swam one arm toward the far bank, pulling her with me, fighting the current that wanted to sweep us downstream. She was dead weight, not swimming, just holding on and trying not to panic. Her added weight kept pulling us under my head, dipping below the surface every few strokes. But I kept kicking, kept pulling, kept moving forward. It felt like it took an hour to cross that narrow creek. Probably took less than a minute, but every second counted. Every stroke mattered. We reached a rocky outcrop on the far side, and I hauled us both up onto it, my arms shaking with effort. Sister Claire collapsed onto the rocks, coughing up creek water, shaking so violently her teeth were rattling together. I was shaking too, my whole body trembling from cold and exertion. Above us on the trail we'd left, we heard the dogs arrive, baying, confused, running back and forth, trying to find the scent again. The water had broken the trail completely. They'd lost us. Brother Daniel's voice carried down to us, angry and frustrated. "They went into the water. Damn it, we'll cut them off at the bridge downstream. They have to cross Thompson's Ford if they're heading to Charleston. We'll get them there." Hoofbeats, moving away fast, leaving us behind. We lay on the rocks, soaked to the bone and freezing, listening as the sounds faded into the distance. When it was quiet again, Sister Claire started to laugh. It was a half-hysterical sound. Part laugh, part sob mixed with coughing and violent shivering. "We're alive," she gasped out between coughs. "I almost drowned. I'm freezing to death. But we're alive." "Can you walk?" I asked, already knowing we had to move. Staying still in wet clothes would kill us as surely as drowning. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "No, ma'am, you don't." I helped her to her feet. We wrung out our clothes as best we could, but we were still soaked, and the temperature was dropping as clouds moved in. We needed to get dry and warm soon. That's when I thought of old Jake Stone. Jake lived in a cabin about 5 miles west of where we were, if I'd calculated our position correctly. He'd been a miner same as me back in the day, before age and a broken leg forced him to retire to the mountains. He'd saved my life during a cave-in back in '87 when a support beam gave way and pinned me. He lifted that beam by himself, pulled me out, carried me 2 miles to the surface. We weren't close friends exactly. Jake didn't do close with anyone, but there was respect between us and a debt. And I'd brought him food through the winter of '93 when he'd broken his leg again and couldn't hunt. Fed him for 3 months until he healed. Now it was time to call in that debt. It was full dark by the time we stumbled up to his place, both of us staggering with exhaustion and cold. The cabin was even smaller than mine, leaning a bit to one side where the foundation had settled unevenly. But warm yellow light showed through the cracks in the walls, and smoke rose from the stone chimney. The smell of cooking food made my stomach clench with hunger. I knocked on the rough wooden door. 3 raps. Pause. 2 raps. The old signal from the mining days. The code that meant friend, not foe. The door cracked open immediately. A shotgun barrel poked through, both hammers cocked and ready. "Who's there?" The voice was rough as gravel, aged but not weak. "Samuel Hewitt, need help, Jake, bad." The barrel lowered slowly. The door swung wide. Old Jake Stone stood in the doorway, backlit by firelight. He had to be at least 80 now, maybe more. Nobody knew for sure, and Jake wasn't telling. His hair and beard were pure white, long and wild, like he'd never met a comb or scissors. He was bent with age, leaning heavy on a gnarled walking stick, his back twisted from years underground. But his eyes were still sharp as a hawk's. Still missed nothing. "Samuel Hewitt," he said slowly, looking me up and down. "Ain't seen you in a coon's age. 2 years 3. "Need help," I said again. My teeth were chattering too hard to say much more. "This here's Sister Claire, she's in trouble." Sam's sharp eyes moved to Claire, taking in her condition in one sweeping glance. Soaked clothes, shivering violently. Face pale as death, hands bleeding. "Come in, child," he said, his voice gentling. "Any friend of Sam's is safe in my home. Come in before you freeze to death on my doorstep." And just like that, we were inside. In the warmth. In safety. For now. Jake Stone's cabin smelled like bean soup and wood smoke and old man. It was small, even smaller than mine, but warm. So wonderfully warm. The fire in the hearth burned bright, pushing back the cold that had settled deep in our bones. Jake moved around the tiny space with surprising quickness, for a man his age, though he leaned heavy on that gnarled walking stick. He pulled out 2 wool blankets from a trunk by the bed, shook them out to clear the dust, and handed them to us without a word. "Strip those wet clothes off," he said, turning his back to give Sister Claire privacy. "Both of you hang them by the fire. Get under those blankets before you catch your death." We did as he said, too cold and exhausted to argue about modesty or propriety. I turned my back as well while Sister Claire changed behind the blanket Jake had strung up as a makeshift divider. When we were both wrapped in dry wool, Jake ladled steaming bean soup into wooden bowls and set them on the rough table. "Eat," he commanded, "then we'll talk." The soup was simple, just beans and a bit of salt pork and some wild onions. But it was hot and it was food, and after 2 days of nothing but dried venison and cornbread, it tasted like the finest meal I'd ever eaten. I could see Sister Claire felt the same. She ate slowly at first, then faster, her body desperate for the warmth and sustenance. Jake watched us eat with those sharp hawk eyes, saying nothing. Just watching. Assessing. When we'd both finished 2 bowls each and were starting to feel almost human again, he finally spoke. "So," he said, settling into his chair with a grunt, "Samuel Hewitt shows up at my door after 2 years with a nun dressed in men's clothes. Both of you half drowned and looking like the devil himself is on your heels. I'm guessing there's a story. There is, I said, and it involves Father Nathaniel Blackwood. Something changed in Jake's face. The weathered lines deepened. His jaw tightened. His knuckles went white where they gripped the walking stick. That name, he said slowly, dangerously, that's a name I hoped never to hear again. Sister Claire and I exchanged glances. There was history here. Dark history. Jake stood up with effort, walked to a shelf, pulled down a clay jug, took a long pull from it, grimacing as the liquor went down. Corn whiskey by the smell. Strong stuff. He didn't offer us any, just took another drink and stared into the fire like he was seeing something there. Something from long ago. Tell me your story first, he said. Then I'll tell you mine. And you'll understand why I'll help you even if it costs me my life. So Sister Claire told it, about finding the ledger, about the 3 days in the cellar, about the threats and the chase through the mountains, about how Father Nathaniel would stop at nothing to keep his crimes hidden. Jake listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, just staring at the fire, taking occasional pulls from that jug. Finally, he spoke. There's something you need to know about Nathaniel Blackwood. Something almost nobody knows. Something that happened 22 years ago. He took another drink, longer this time, like he needed the courage. His name wasn't always Blackwood. Back in '73, he was a boy of maybe 16, went by Nathan Black, worked the mines same as the rest of us, down in the Pocahontas seam near Bluefield. Dangerous work, more dangerous than most because the company cut corners, didn't shore up the tunnels proper, used old timber that was starting to rot. I knew those mines, had worked them myself for a year before moving to better operations. Jake was right, they were death traps. There were 6 of us working a deep tunnel that summer, me, Nathan Black, and 4 others. Good men, family men. We'd been digging for weeks, following a rich vein of coal going deeper and deeper into the mountain. Jake's hands were shaking now. He set down the jug and gripped his walking stick with both hands like it was the only thing keeping him upright. One afternoon, the ceiling started making sounds. Creaking, groaning. We all heard it, knew what it meant. Support beam was failing. We needed to get out fast. We started moving toward the entrance, but the beam gave way before we could make it. Came down like thunder, blocked the main tunnel, trapped 5 of us on the wrong side. Sister Claire had gone very still, listening with complete attention. Nathan was closer to the entrance when it happened. He was on the safe side, could have run for help, should have run for help, but there was a gap in the fallen rock, big enough for a skinny boy to squeeze through, big enough to pass tools through, maybe even dig us out if he worked fast. Jake's voice went hard, cold as winter stone. We called to him, begged him, told him to get a pick, start digging. We had maybe an hour before bad air would kill us, maybe less. He looked at us through that gap. I'll never forget his eyes, cold, calculating, like he was doing math in his head, figuring odds. Then he said something I've remembered every day since. He said nothing personal, but there's no profit in dying today. Sister Claire gasped. I felt my own breath catch. He turned and walked away, left us there to do. But you didn't die, I said. No, through pure luck and the grace of God, the collapse had actually opened up an old, worked-out tunnel behind us. We found it in the dark, followed it 3 miles through the mountain, crawling on our bellies, breathing air so bad it made us dizzy. Took us 8 hours, but we got out. By the time we made it back to the surface, Nathan Black was gone, vanished. And before he left, he'd gone through the belongings we'd left in the changing room. Stolen what little money we had, our watches, everything of value. Jake's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. 5 men went into that mine with me. I was the only one who made it out. The others didn't find that old tunnel in time. Suffocated in the dark while that boy walked away counting stolen coins. The cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire. I tried to find him, spent years looking, but he'd disappeared, changed his name, changed his whole life. Eventually, I figured he'd died somewhere or left the region entirely. Jake looked up at Sister Claire, and his eyes were full of old grief and older rage. Then about 10 years ago, I heard about a new priest at St. Catherine's Abbey in Harlan Springs. Young man, they said, charismatic, smart, doing wonderful work with the community. They said his name was Father Nathaniel Blackwood. I went to see for myself, sat in the back of the church one Sunday, and there he was, older, polished, wearing priest's robes instead of miner's clothes. But the eyes were the same, those cold, calculating eyes. Did you confront him, I asked him. I tried after the service, but he had the sheriff with him, guards, important people around him all the time. I got close enough for him to see me, close enough for him to recognize me. And you know what he did? What? He smiled, just a little, like it was a private joke between us, like daring me to speak up. But who would believe an old miner over a respected priest? So I went back to my cabin, and I've stayed here ever since, watching, waiting, knowing that someday his evil would catch up to him. Jake stood up with effort, walked to a corner of the cabin, and pulled back a loose floorboard. From the hiding place beneath, he withdrew a Colt revolver, well-oiled and carefully maintained. He checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. All good. Samuel, you're taking this girl to Charleston, to the marshal, and you're going to make them listen. He held out the Colt to me. This is for the road. It's a good gun. Reliable. I've kept it clean all these years for a purpose. This is that purpose. I took the revolver, felt its weight in my hand. It had been years since I'd carried a sidearm. The Winchester was my weapon of choice, but in close quarters, a pistol could mean the difference between living and dying. There's something else, Jake said. He went back to the trunk and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Another map, this one newer than mine with details I'd never seen. This shows a shortcut. The old Cherokee Trail connects with the Seneca Path about 10 miles west of here. Take the Seneca Path, and you'll cut a full day off your journey to Charleston. It's harder going, steeper, but faster. He traced the route with one gnarled finger. You'll have to cross Thompson's Ford. That's the only bridge over Blackwater Creek for 20 miles in either direction. If Nathaniel's men have any sense, they'll figure out you're heading for Charleston, and they'll set up there to wait for you. How do we get around them? Sister Claire asked. You don't, Jake said bluntly. You go through them. Use speed and surprise. Get across that bridge before they can react. He looked at me seriously. Samuel, this is the most important thing I'm going to tell you. When you get to Charleston, you find Marshal Thomas Wade. Only him. Don't trust the local sheriff. Don't trust the deputies. Half of them are in Nathaniel's pocket. Wade is honest. He's federal. He can't be bought. I know Wade, I said. Worked with him during the mine riots in '87. He's a good man. Then you've got a chance. We spent the rest of that evening planning. Jake shared what dried provisions he could spare. Gave us better boots for Sister Claire worn, but serviceable. Showed us on the map where to find water along the route and where to avoid because of rockfall danger. As the night wore on and exhaustion finally claimed Sister Claire, she curled up on Jake's bed with the blankets wrapped around her. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Jake and I sat by the fire speaking in low voices so as not to wake her. You care about this girl, Jake said. Not a question. She deserves help, deserves justice. That's not what I asked. I stared into the flames thinking about Kate, about 8 years of silence and regret, about this woman who'd run through mountains barefoot rather than stay quiet about evil. I don't know what I feel, I admitted. All I know is I couldn't stay silent this time. Couldn't let another person suffer because I was too afraid to act. Jake nodded slowly. Your wife, Catherine. You ever find out what happened to her? No, never heard from her after she left. You ever think maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself? Time to forgive yourself for being human? Every day, I said, but knowing something and doing something are different things. They are. But here's what I learned in my 80-some years on this earth. Redemption don't come from suffering. It comes from action. You can't change the past. Can't bring back those 5 miners who died in the dark. Can't undo whatever happened with your Catherine. But you can choose what you do right now, today, this moment. He poked at the fire with his walking stick, sending up sparks. Don't let this one go, Samuel. Don't let silence win again. I looked over at Sister Claire, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Even in sleep, one hand rested on the spot where the ledger was hidden inside her shirt, protecting it, protecting the truth. I won't, I promised. Not this time. Jake smiled, then the first real smile I'd seen from him all evening. Good, now get some sleep. You've got a hard road ahead, and I've got something to do at first light. What's that? Going to pay a visit to those men with the yigs, lead them on a nice long chase in the wrong direction. Give you two a head start. Jake, you don't have to do that. I know I don't, but those 5 miners who died while Nathan Black walked away, they were my friends, my brothers. And I've waited 22 years to strike back at the man who killed them. This is my chance. I'm taking it. There was no arguing with that kind of determination. I just nodded and we sat together in companionable silence, 2 old miners watching the fire burn down to embers. We left Jake's cabin before dawn just as gray light was starting to seep into the eastern sky. Jake stood in his doorway, that ancient shotgun cradled in his arms, watching us go. Don't look back, he called after us. Keep moving forward. Always forward. I raised a hand in farewell without turning around. Sister Claire did the same. And then we were into the trees and Jake's cabin disappeared behind us. The Seneca path was everything Jake had promised. Narrow, steep, difficult. But it ran along the ridge tops where the going was clearer, where you could see for miles in all directions. We made good time through the morning, the sun climbing higher, burning off the mist that clung to the valleys below. Sister Claire moved better today. The rest and food at Jake's cabin had restored some of her strength. The borrowed boots fit better than mine had. And there was something else, a change in how she carried herself. Less like a victim fleeing and more like a warrior on a mission. Around midday, we stopped to rest on a flat boulder that jutted out from the ridge, giving us a clear view of the mountains stretching in every direction. To the east, the way we'd come. To the west, the direction we were heading. And far below, winding through the valleys, the silver ribbon of Blackwater Creek. How much farther? Sister Claire asked, taking a drink from the canteen. Thompson's Ford is maybe 5 miles ahead. If we push hard, we can reach it before dark. She nodded, staring at the distant creek. They'll be waiting there, won't they? Probably. And if we can't get past them, I thought about that. About the Colt on my hip and the Winchester on my back. About what I was willing to do to keep this woman safe. To make sure the truth got heard. We'll get past them. She turned to look at me, really look at me. Her green eyes were serious. Have you ever killed anyone, Sam? The question hung in the air between us. No, I said honestly. Came close a few times in the mines. Fights over cards or women or just bad temper after too many hours underground. But I always pulled back, always found another way. Could you do it now if you had to? To protect me? I met her eyes, didn't look away. I hope I don't have to find out. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was honest, and I think she appreciated that. We walked on through the afternoon, the sun tracking across the sky above us. Sister Claire told me more about her life, about growing up in an orphanage in Pittsburgh after her parents died of fever when she was 7, about the nuns who raised her, about taking her vows at 18 because the church was the only family she'd ever known. I loved it at first, she said as we picked our way along a particularly narrow section of trail. The structure, the purpose, the feeling of being part of something bigger than myself. I thought I'd found my calling. What changed? I started seeing things. Little things at first. Cruelties masked as discipline. Greed hiding behind piety. And when I questioned it, when I asked why I was told that obedience was the highest virtue, that questioning was the same as doubt. That doubt was sin. She paused to catch her breath on a steep incline. But isn't questioning how we find truth, isn't doubt what drives us to seek real understanding rather than blind acceptance? Sounds reasonable to me. Not to the church, not to Father Nathaniel. He saw questioning as threat, saw independent thought as rebellion. And when I found that ledger, when I saw proof of his crimes, I realized the whole thing was a lie. Not God, not faith, but the institution built around it. The men who use God's name to justify their own evil. We reached the top of the rise and paused to rest. Below us, maybe 2 miles away now, I could see the glint of water, Blackwater Creek. And somewhere down there, the bridge at Thompson's Ford. What will you do after? I asked. After we get to Charleston, after you testify, the church won't take you back." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I know. I've broken my vows, worn men's clothes, traveled alone with a man. Even if they believed me about Father Nathaniel, which they won't, I could never return to that life." "So what then?" She stared at the distant mountains, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not fear, not determination. Something else. Hope. "I could teach," she said quietly. "Reading and writing. The orphanage taught me well. And there are children in these mountains who have no school, no chance to learn. I could help them. That's a good calling. Better than blind obedience to corrupt men anyway." We started down toward the creek, moving more carefully now. If Daniel and Francis were waiting at the bridge, we'd be walking into an ambush. We needed to be smart about this. As we got closer, I heard it. The rush of water, louder than it should be, much louder. We came through a stand of pines, and there it was, Blackwater Creek. But it wasn't the creek from Jake's map. That had shown a gentle ford shallow enough to wade across with a simple wooden bridge for wagons. This was a torrent. Spring runoff from the high peaks had turned the normally placid creek into a raging river. The water was brown with mud churning and boiling over rocks carrying whole tree branches in its current. It had to be at least 4 feet deep, maybe more, fast enough and strong enough to sweep a man off his feet and dash him against the rocks downstream. And the bridge. The bridge was still there, but it looked like it had been built 20 years ago and not maintained since. Wooden planks, some of them cracked or missing entirely. Rope railings that hung loose and frayed. The whole structure swayed and creaked in the wind, groaning like it was in pain. "We're supposed to cross that." Sister Claire's voice was small. "It's the only way. Next bridge is 20 miles south. We don't have time for that." I studied the bridge carefully. It was maybe 50 feet long, 4 feet wide, suspended over the churning water 15 feet below. The planks looked solid enough on this end, but the middle section, that was concerning. Several boards were definitely rotten. We'd have to step carefully, test each plank before trusting it with full weight. "I'll go first," I said. "Test the boards. You follow exactly where I step. Don't look down at the water. Just watch my feet." "Sam." "Yeah. I'm scared." "I know, so am I, but we don't have a choice." I stepped onto the bridge. The whole structure swayed under my weight. The ropes creaked. Below, the water rushed past, hypnotic and deadly. I took another step. The plank held. Another step. Still good. I was maybe 10 feet out when Sister Claire followed. I felt the bridge shift as her weight joined mine. The swaying increased, but it held. We moved slowly, carefully testing each board before committing our full weight. The wind picked up, making the bridge sway more violently. Sister Claire made a small sound of fear behind me, but kept moving. Halfway across now. The water directly below us, churning brown and angry. If we fell from here, we'd be dead before we could even try to swim. Drowned or battered to death on the rocks. Maybe both. That's when I saw them. 2 figures emerging from the trees on the far side of the bridge, moving into position at the end we were trying to reach. Brother Daniel and Brother Francis. They'd been waiting, probably all day. And now they had us exactly where they wanted us, trapped on a bridge with nowhere to run. We stopped. Sister Claire saw them too. I felt her freeze behind me. Brother Daniel was massive. 6.5 feet tall, built like a blacksmith, shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His face looked like it had been carved from granite, all angles and hard planes. In his hands he carried a woodsman's axe, the kind used for felling trees. The blade gleamed sharp in the late afternoon sun. Brother Francis was smaller, but no less dangerous. Quick and wiry, he moved like a weasel, couldn't stay still. His eyes darted constantly, taking everything in, calculating. A hunting knife hung from his belt. Long blade, at least 8 inches. Both men looked tired, angry, like they'd been led on a long chase through rough country by an old man who knew these mountains better than they ever would. Jake had done his job, bought us time, but not enough. "End of the road, Sister Claire," Daniel called out. His voice was deep and rough, used to giving orders and being obeyed. "Father Nathaniel wants his property back. The ledger. Give it over and we'll let you both go. You're lying, I call back. You can't let us live. We know too much. Daniel shrugged those massive shoulders. True enough, but we can make it quick, painless, or we can make it hurt. Your choice. Sister Claire's hand found my arm. Her fingers dug in hard. What do we do? I assessed the situation fast. We were halfway across the bridge, maybe 25 feet from Daniel and Francis, 25 feet from safety, or from death, depending on what happened next. Behind us going back meant another day's delay, meant Father Nathaniel would have more time to prepare, more time to spread lies, more time to make sure no one would believe Claire's testimony. Forward meant going through these two men, men who'd been sent to kill us, men who would show no mercy. I reached down slow and careful, making sure they could see every movement, drew the Colt from my belt, held it up where they could see it clear. We're coming across, I said. Don't try to stop us. Daniel actually laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You going to shoot us, old man? You and what aim? You're standing on a swaying bridge. Can't even hold that pistol steady. You'd be lucky to hit the creek, let alone us. He wasn't wrong. The bridge was swaying. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and I'd never been a great pistol shot even in my youth. Preferred the rifle where I could take my time, line up the shot proper. But they didn't know that for certain, and uncertainty was a weapon all its own. Keep moving, I said quietly to Claire. Slow, follow my steps exactly. We started forward again, one careful step at a time. The bridge swaying under us, the water churning below, and two killers waiting ahead. I was maybe 15 feet away when Daniel made his move. He stepped onto the bridge, axe raised. Francis moved to come around his left side. I raised the Colt, aimed at the sky above Daniel's head, and pulled the trigger. The shot was thunderously loud, echoing off the rocks and trees. Birds exploded from the branches above, shrieking in alarm. Daniel froze mid-step. So did Francis, both men staring at me with new respect. Or maybe just surprised that I'd actually fired. Next one doesn't miss, I lied. Truth was, I wasn't sure I could hit them even if I wanted to, but they didn't need to know that. You think you can get us both before we reach you? Daniel challenged. But he'd stopped advancing. That was something. Don't need to get you both, just need to get one. And I'm betting your friend there, I nodded at Francis, doesn't have the stomach to finish the job alone. Francis looked offended but didn't argue. That told me everything I needed to know. He was hired muscle, a follower, not a leader. We were 10 feet away now, close enough to see the sweat on Daniel's face, close enough to smell him. Sweat and tobacco and something else. Fear, maybe, or just exertion from a long day of hunting. Stand aside, I said. Let us pass. You can tell Father Nathaniel you tried your best, but we got away. No shame in that. He'll kill us, Daniel said flatly. Then you've got a choice to make. Die here today or take your chances with him later. At least later gives you options. Daniel's eyes flicked between me and Sister Claire. I could see him calculating, weighing odds, trying to figure the angles. Then Francis made his decision for both of them. The younger man lunged forward, knife drawn, going for my gun hand. Fast, faster than I had expected. But Sister Claire was faster. She'd been holding that thick branch she'd found earlier, the one she'd been using as a walking stick. And now she swung it with both hands like a club. The branch caught Francis across the side of the head with a solid thunk that I felt in my bones. Francis went down hard, dropped like someone had cut his strings, hit the bridge deck face first and didn't move. Just lay there, groaning, hands clutching his head. Sister Claire stood over him, breathing hard, still holding the branch. Her eyes were wide, shocked at what she'd just done. But also something else. Determined. She'd crossed a line. The church taught turning the other cheek, taught forgiveness and mercy. And she'd just struck a man hard enough to possibly kill him. The internal struggle played across her face, horror at her own violence, but also the knowledge that it had been necessary, that sometimes survival meant doing things your conscience screamed against. Daniel stared at his fallen companion, then at Sister Claire, then at me. I kept the Colt trained on his chest. My hand was steadier now. The adrenaline had burned away the trembling. Your choice, I said again. Stand aside or join him on the deck. For a long moment, everything balanced on the edge of a knife. Daniel could rush us, could try to overwhelm us with his size and strength. We might get him, might not. Either way, people would die on this bridge. Then Daniel stepped backward, off the bridge, back onto solid ground. You win today, he said, but Father Nathaniel has friends in Charleston. Important friends. You'll never get your story heard. And even if you do, no one will believe a hysterical nun and a hermit over a respected priest. We'll see, I said. We moved past him, Sister Claire stepping over Francis's groaning body, me keeping the colt trained on Daniel the whole time. When we reached solid ground on the far side, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Really breathe. We'd made it across. Against odds. Against men sent to kill us, we'd made it. Run, I said to Claire. And we did. Behind us, Daniel's voice carried on the wind. You can't run forever. Father Nathaniel always collects what's owed to him. Always. But we were already into the trees, putting distance between us and that bridge running toward Charleston and Marshall Wade in the hope of justice. Sister Claire still carried that branch. And I noticed she didn't throw it away. We didn't stop running until the light failed completely and we couldn't see the trail anymore. Only then did we collapse against the trunk of an old oak, gasping for breath, hearts pounding. I hit him. Sister Claire said. Her voice was strange, distant. I hit that man with a branch. He could be dead. He's not dead. I saw him moving. But I could have killed him. I wanted to kill him in that moment. Wanted to hurt him for hunting us, for threatening us, for everything Father Nathaniel has done. She looked at her hands like they belonged to someone else. What does that make me? I'm supposed to be a woman of God, supposed to show mercy and forgiveness. And instead I reached out and took her hands in mine, held them firm, made her look at me. You did what you had to do. That's not sin. That's survival. The church teaches that violence is always wrong, that we should turn the other cheek, that the church also teaches that we should stand up for truth and justice, I interrupted, that we should protect the innocent. Sometimes those teachings conflict, and when they do, you have to choose which principle matters more. How do I know I chose right? Did you want to hurt him, or did you want to stop him from hurting us? She thought about that. Stop him. I just wanted us to be safe. Wanted to get to Charleston, to tell the truth. Then you chose right. Don't let anyone, not even God himself, tell you different. We sat in silence for a while, letting our breathing return to normal. The night sounds of the forest surrounded us. Crickets and tree frogs, an owl hunting somewhere in the darkness. The normal sounds of the mountain at peace. Tell me something, Claire said after a while. About Catherine, about what went wrong. I didn't want to talk about Kate. But after what Claire had just been through, after the line she just crossed, she deserved honesty from me. I loved her, I said slowly. Loved her more than I knew how to say. But when she got sick, when she needed me to fight for her but didn't, I was so focused on the practical side, on finding money, on solving the problem the only way I knew how, with hard work and patience, Mr. Dome. But she didn't need patience, she needed action. Needed me to tear apart the world if that's what it took to save her. Instead, I just kept working my shifts, kept saving pennies, kept telling her to wait. And she got tired of waiting. Yeah. Do you think she's still alive? Claire asked softly. I don't know. Sometimes I think yes, sometimes I think no. Mostly I just think I'll never know. And that's my punishment, the not knowing. Claire leaned her head against my shoulder, not romantic, just human connection. Two people who'd been through hell together, finding comfort in shared presence. You're different than you were, she observed. When I first saw you by that creek, you seemed so cold, so distant. But you're not really, are you? I got in the habit of silence, of keeping everything locked inside. Thought it made me strong. Turned out it just made me alone. You're not alone now. No, I'm not. We sat there as the stars came out one by one until the whole sky was filled with them. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light, beautiful, eternal, indifferent to human suffering. We should sleep, I finally said. We've got maybe 10 more miles tomorrow. If we start at dawn and push hard, we can reach Charleston by evening. And then we find Marshall Wade, give him the ledger, tell him everything, and hope he believes us. What if he doesn't? Then we find someone who will. We don't stop until someone listens. We made a cold camp. No fire. Too risky with Daniel and Francis still somewhere behind us. We shared the last of Jake's dried provisions and drank water from a creek that ran clear and cold down the mountainside. When it was full dark, I gave Claire my jacket to use as a blanket. She protested, but I insisted. I was used to mountain nights, used to being cold. She wasn't. Before she curled up to sleep, she said one more thing. Sam, thank you for everything, for believing me when no one else would, for protecting me, for teaching me that silence isn't always the answer. Get some sleep, sister. Claire, just call me Claire. I'm not sure I'm a sister anymore. Not in any way that matters. Good night, Claire. Good night, Sam. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's trials. But I stayed awake, keeping watch, the Colt in my lap and the Winchester within easy reach. Tomorrow we'd reach Charleston. Tomorrow we'd face Marshall Wade and tell our story. Tomorrow we'd find out if truth was enough to overcome power and position and the weight of institutional authority. But tonight, sitting under the stars with a woman who'd learned to fight back, sleeping peacefully beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 years. Hope. Maybe it wasn't too late for redemption after all. Maybe silence could be broken. Maybe cowards could find their courage. Maybe. The wind sighed through the pines. An owl called from somewhere in the darkness, hunting. And I sat watch through the long night, waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. We reached the outskirts of Charleston as the afternoon sun was slanting toward evening, casting long shadows across the rutted road. The town sprawled along the Elk River, bigger than anything I'd seen in 8 years. 3-story brick buildings. Gas lamps lining the main street, waiting for dusk to bring them to life. The smell of coal smoke and cooking food and river water. The sound of wagon wheels on cobblestones and voices calling to each other, and somewhere a train whistle, long and lonely. After 3 days in the wilderness, it felt like stepping into a different world. A world of civilization and society, and all the rules that came with it. Sister Claire stopped at the edge of town, staring at the buildings and people with something like fear in her eyes. What's wrong? I asked. I look like a wild woman, wearing men's clothes, hair a mess. They'll think I'm mad. They'll think Father Nathaniel was right about me. She wasn't wrong. We both looked like we'd been dragged through the mountains by our heels, which we had more or less. My beard was wild, my clothes torn and stained. Claire's borrowed trousers were caked with mud, the shirt ripped at one shoulder. Her face was scratched from branches, her hands bandaged where blisters had broken and bled. We looked exactly like what we were. Refugees, runners, people fleeing something terrible. We clean up as best we can, I said. Then we go straight to Marshall Wade at the courthouse. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone else. Just get to Wade. We found a pump behind the general store and washed our faces and hands in the cold water. I did what I could to tame my beard with my fingers. Claire braided her hair again, pulling it tight and neat. It helped. Not much, but some. Then we walked down Main Street toward the courthouse. People stared. Of course they did. A mountain man with a rifle and a young woman in men's clothes. We were a sight. I heard whispers as we passed, saw women pull their children closer, saw men's hands drift toward weapons they might be carrying. The courthouse sat at the end of Main Street, grand and imposing. Red brick with white columns supporting a triangular pediment. Federal-style architecture meant to inspire respect for the law and order it represented. Broad steps led up to double doors of dark wood with brass handles. I hoped that law and order was more than just show. Inside the hallway echoed with our footsteps on marble floors. Everything was clean, orderly, official. A clerk sat at a desk in the main lobby, an older man with spectacles and ink stains on his fingers. He looked up as we approached, his nose wrinkling slightly at our appearance. Help you? His tone suggested he'd rather we leave. Looking for Marshal Thomas Wade, U.S. Marshal. Second floor room 214, but it's late. He may have gone home for the evening. I'll take my chances. We climbed the stairs, our worn boots leaving faint mud prints on the clean marble. Found the door marked with brass letters, U.S. Marshal Thomas Wade. I knocked. 3 solid raps. Come in. The voice was familiar, deeper than I remembered, roughened by more years of commanding men and dealing with criminals, but still the same voice that had talked down angry miners and corrupt company bosses back in '87. I opened the door. Marshal Thomas Wade sat behind a desk, papers spread before him. He was maybe mid-50s now, built solid and square like the brick building that housed him. Steel gray hair, cut military short. Mustache trimmed neat. Black vest with a silver star pinned to it. A Winchester rifle leaned against the wall behind him, within easy reach. He looked up from his paperwork, and for a moment his face was blank. Then recognition dawned. Samuel Hewitt. He said it slow, like he was testing whether his memory was playing tricks. I'll be damned. Thomas Wade. Been a long time. 8 years, 9 maybe. Heard you went up into the mountains. Became a hermit. Something like that. Wade's sharp eyes moved to Claire, taking in her condition with the quick assessment of a lawman who'd seen everything and wasn't easily shocked. Must be important to bring you down from those mountains, to bring you here looking like you've been through hell and back. It is, and we have. Wade closed the folder he'd been working on, giving us his full attention. Gestured to the 2 chairs facing his desk. Sit. Both of you, start talking. So we did. Claire told her story first. About Father Nathaniel and St. Catherine's Abbey, about finding the ledger, about the 3 days locked in darkness, about the threats and the chase through the mountains and the men who'd hunted us with dogs. Wade listened without interrupting, his face getting harder with each detail. When Claire finished, she pulled the ledger from inside her shirt and set it on his desk, like laying down evidence in a trial. Wade opened it carefully, studied the entries with that same careful attention he'd given to union complaints and company ledgers all those years ago. Cross-referenced some of the locations with a map he pulled from his drawer, a map of Monongahela National Forest with restricted timber areas marked in red. Every single entry, he said, after a long examination, corresponds to protected land, federal land where cutting requires permits, expensive permits that take months to acquire. He closed the ledger and looked at Claire. You understand what you're accusing here. Father Nathaniel Blackwood is a respected man in this state. He has friends, important friends, senators, businessmen. Even the governor has dined at his table. I know what I saw, Claire said quietly, but her voice was steady. I know what's in that ledger, and I know what he did to me when I tried to speak the truth. Wade nodded slowly. I believe you. But believing you and proving it in a court of law are 2 different things. This ledger is good evidence, real good. But Nathaniel will claim it's forged, or stolen and altered, or that the entries are legitimate and you're misunderstanding them. Without a witness, without someone else who can corroborate your story, this becomes your word against his. And his word carries more weight in this state than yours does. That's not right, but it's the truth. My stomach dropped. We'd come all this way, risked everything, and it might not be enough. What do we need, I asked, to make it stick? Wade leaned back in his chair, thinking. A witness, someone who saw the timber being cut, or transported, or sold. Someone who can testify that they saw illegal activity connected to Father Nathaniel. He paused and something changed in his expression. Your wife, Sam, Catherine Hewitt. The world stopped. My heart stopped. Everything stopped. What? The word came out barely above a whisper. She works at Charleston General Hospital, East Wing. Has for about 6-7 months now. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room spun around me. Kate, here, in Charleston, all this time. You knew, I managed to ask. I knew there was a Catherine Hewitt working at the hospital. Put 2 and 2 together when you walked in. Figured you didn't know or you'd have mentioned it. What? I had to stop, clear my throat, try again. What does she have to do with this? She came to me about 6 months back, maybe 7, said she'd witnessed something suspicious near the railroad depot late one night. Wagons loading timber, heavy loads, no lamps, men acting furtive, looking over their shoulders. She thought it was strange enough to report. I took her statement, filed it, but without proof of actual wrongdoing, I couldn't act. As far as I knew, it was legitimate timber being moved at night to avoid the heat. Wade tapped the ledger. But with this, her testimony takes on new meaning. The dates match, the locations match, And if she's willing to testify, if she's willing to stand up in court and tell what she saw, combined with this ledger and Sister Claire's testimony about how Nathaniel treated her when she found it, he let the sentence hang. We'd have a case, a real case, one that could actually result in conviction. I sat there trying to process. Kate, here, alive, working, living a life I knew nothing about. And she'd been trying to stop Nathaniel's crimes all along in her own way, and even without knowing about Claire or the ledger. I can't. The words stuck in my throat. I can't ask her. Not after what I did. Not after 8 years of silence. Claire's hand found mine, squeezed. Maybe she won't do it for you, Wade said gently, but she might do it for Sister Claire. She might do it because it's right. He stood up, moved to the window overlooking the street. Sam, I know there's history there. I know it's complicated, but if you want to help Sister Claire, if you want to stop Nathaniel, we need Catherine's testimony. We need her. I looked at Claire, saw the hope and fear warring in her eyes. Hope that we might actually succeed. Fear that I'd say no, that I'd let my own pain stop us from getting justice. I thought about Kate, about the letter K worn smooth on her tin cup, about 8 years of silence or in regret. And I thought about Jake's words. Redemption comes from action. Where's the hospital? I asked. Wade gave me directions. 3 blocks east, big brick building. Couldn't miss it. I stood up, legs unsteady. Wait here, I told Claire. I'll go. Sam, her voice stopped me at the door. Thank you for everything. I just nodded and walked out. Charleston General Hospital loomed 3 stories tall, dark red brick weathered by coal smoke and time. Built during the war to treat wounded soldiers now serving miners and railroad workers and anyone else who could pay or who the charity fund would cover. I stood across the street from the main entrance, frozen. 8 years since I'd seen Kate's face, since I'd heard her voice, since I'd failed her so completely that she'd left without saying goodbye. What would she look like now? Would she even recognize me? Would she want to see me at all? An old man sat on a bench near the hospital steps, smoking a pipe and watching the evening traffic. He caught me staring and called out, "You gonna stand there all night or you going to go inside?" I didn't answer. Let me tell you something, son. Things we run from don't get smaller with distance. They grow teeth. They wait for us in our sleep. Better to face them head on than let them chase you forever. He was right. I knew he was right. I crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it. Inside, the hospital smelled like carbolic acid and lye soap, and something underneath that might have been suffering or might have been hope. The walls were painted white, trying for cheerful but landing closer to institutional. Oil lamps hung from the ceiling, casting warm light that couldn't quite push back all the shadows. A nurse sat at a desk in the main lobby. Older woman, steel gray hair pulled back severe. She looked up as I approached, her expression suggesting she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. Help you. Looking for Catherine Hewitt. Told she works here, East Wing. Visiting hours are over. I'm her husband. The eyebrow went up so high it nearly reached her hairline. Her husband? Yes, ma'am. She studied me for a long moment, some internal calculation happening behind those sharp eyes. She's never mentioned a husband. No, I don't imagine she would. Something in my voice must have convinced her because she stood up with a sigh. Ward 3, end of that hallway. Turn left. She's tending to patients. Don't disturb her work. No, ma'am. Thank you. I walked down the hallway, boots echoing on the wooden floors, past open doors showing rooms with beds lined up, neat patients in various stages of illness or injury. The soft sounds of coughing, low conversation, the rustle of sheets. Ward 3 was at the end of the hall. Through the glass window in the door I could see inside, and there she was. Kate, standing beside a bed changing bandages on an old man's arm. Her back was to me, but I'd know her anywhere. The way she moved, efficient but gentle. The way she tilted her head when concentrating. The way her hands worked with sure practiced movements. Her hair was darker than I remembered. Or no, not darker. Threaded with gray now. Still pulled back in a simple bun, practical for work. She wore a gray dress with a white apron over it, the uniform of a hospital nurse. Sleeves rolled to the elbows. Hands that I remembered as soft, now moving with confident skill. She looked older. Of course she did. 8 years had passed. but she also looked stronger, somehow, more certain of herself, like she'd found something in these years that she hadn't had before. Purpose, maybe, or just peace. I stood there watching through the glass, unable to make myself open that door, unable to face what came next. Then she finished with the patient, said something that made him smile and turned toward the door, toward me. Our eyes met through the glass. She froze. Color drained from her face. Her hand went to her throat like she couldn't breathe. For a moment, we just stared at each other through that barrier of glass and time and all the things left unsaid between us. Then she set down the bandages carefully, spoke to another nurse nearby, walked toward the door, toward me. She opened it and stepped into the hallway. We stood maybe 3 feet apart, close enough to touch, but not touching. A whole world of silence between us. Samuel, her voice was quieter than I remembered, but steady. Catherine, you look like you've been living in the wilderness. I have, up in the mountains, built a cabin. I heard. A pause. Why are you here? Straight to the point. That was Kate, never one to dance around difficult things. I need your help, not for me, for someone else. Something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment maybe, or relief that this wasn't about us. Come with me. She led me down another hallway to a small room, little more than a closet with 2 chairs and a table, the place where doctors probably took families to deliver bad news. She closed the door and we sat. The silence stretched between us like a living thing. Tell me, she said, so I did. Told her about Claire and the ledger and Father Nathaniel, about the chase through the mountains and Thompson's Ford and finally reaching Charleston, about how Marshal Wade said we needed a witness and that Kate had reported seeing something 6 months ago. She listened without interrupting, her face growing harder as the story progressed. I remember that night. I was walking home late from a double shift, tired, just wanting my bed, and I saw wagons near the railroad depot, heavy loads, timber, moving quietly like they didn't want to be seen. I thought it was strange, reported it to Marshal Wade, but nothing came of it. With the ledger, your testimony matters. It proves the pattern, proves Nathaniel is running an illegal operation. Kate stood up, walked to the small window that looked out over the darkening street. You haven't asked me a single question about myself, Samuel. Haven't asked where I've been, how I've survived, whether I'm well, whether I'm happy. Nothing. The words were sharp, true, deserved. I don't have the right to ask those questions. No, you don't. She turned to face me. But I'll answer them anyway, because somebody should. I went east, found my aunt in Pittsburgh. She took me in. I worked in a textile mill for 2 years, saved every penny, got treatment for my lungs from a doctor who didn't charge much because I reminded him of his daughter. Then I came here to Charleston, learned nursing, got this job, built a life, she paused. I like my work here, Samuel. I like helping people. I like having purpose beyond just being someone's wife. I'm good at this, and I'm happy, happier than I was. The words hurt, but they also brought a strange kind of relief. She'd survived, thrived even, without me. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. You deserve that. Do I? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. After I walked away without a fight, after I gave up on us. I gave up first. I should have fought for you. Should have torn apart the world to save you. Instead, I just kept working my shifts and saving pennies and telling you to wait. I got tired of waiting. I know. We sat with that for a moment. 8 years of failure and regret filling the small room like smoke. What happened to you? Kate asked. After I left, you became a hermit. Couldn't stand the mine anymore. Couldn't stand the town. So I went up into the mountains, built a cabin, lived alone, figured that's what I deserved for failing you so completely. And you've been there ever since, alone. Until 4 days ago when Claire showed up bleeding and terrified by my creek. Kate studied me, really looked at me in a way she hadn't since I'd arrived. You're different. Something changed in you. A woman taught me that silence isn't strength, that sometimes you have to speak even when it costs everything. That watching and waiting isn't the same as action. This nun, Sister Claire, yes, you love her. Not a question, an observation. And I couldn't deny it because Kate had always been able to see right through me. I don't know, maybe, probably, but that's not why I'm helping her. No, you're helping her because it's right, because you're finally learning to act instead of just enduring. She moved to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. I'll testify. Not for you, Samuel. For her. For Sister Claire. Because I know what it's like to not be heard, to not be believed, to feel invisible while powerful men do whatever they want. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small notebook, set it on the table between us. There's something else you should know about Father Nathaniel's operation. It's bigger than just stealing timber. What do you mean? That night I saw the wagons, I followed them, kept to the shadows. They didn't just go to the railroad depot. They went to the docks. There were boats waiting, big boats, and I saw money changing hands. A lot of money. This isn't just about illegal logging. This is about interstate commerce, maybe even international. That timber is going somewhere far beyond West Virginia, and Nathaniel is making a fortune. I wrote down everything I saw, dates, times, descriptions, everything I could remember. Give this to the marshal. Tell him it might help. She pressed the notebook into my hand. Our fingers touched briefly, just for a moment, and I felt the ghost of what we'd been, young and hopeful and believing love could conquer anything. Then the moment passed. Goodbye, Samuel. She walked out of the room, down the hallway, back to her patients, back to the life she'd built without me. And I sat there holding her notebook, feeling the weight of 8 years lift and settle at the same time. I walked back to the courthouse as full dark settled over Charleston. The gas lamps had come to life, casting pools of yellow light on the cobblestones. The street was quieter now, most businesses closed for the evening. Only the saloons were still lively piano music and laughter drifting out through open doors. Marshal Wade's office was still lit. I climbed the stairs and went in without knocking. Claire jumped up from her chair when she saw me, read my face, trying to gauge what had happened. She'll testify, I said. And she has this. I set Kate's notebook on Wade's desk. He picked it up, flipped through it, his eyes widening as he read. Dates, times, detailed descriptions, boats at the dock, money changing hands. He looked up. This is gold. Combined with the ledger and both women's testimony, we have a case that can't be ignored. He stood up, moved to the window, thinking. But here's the problem. Nathaniel isn't stupid. He'll know Claire got to Charleston. He'll know she's here with me, and he won't wait for a trial. He'll come for her tonight, bring men, try to silence her before she can testify. Can't you arrest him now? Claire asked. With the evidence we have. Not without a warrant. And to get a warrant, I need to present evidence to a judge. That takes time. A day at least. Maybe 2. We don't have 2 days, I said. No, we don't. The door opened. Deputy William Hayes came in young and eager, maybe 25, still new enough to the bottom that his badge gleamed like it was polished daily. Marshal, there's a man downstairs asking about a nun, says she's his responsibility, says she's ill and he's come to take her home for treatment. Wade and I exchanged looks. Let me guess, Wade said. Well-dressed, smooth talker, acts like he's everyone's friend. Yes, sir. Said his name was Father Nathaniel Blackwood. Claire's face went white. He's here, in Charleston, already. Wade cursed under his breath. Then his face cleared as an idea formed. What if we let him come, he said slowly. What if we use his arrogance against him? What do you mean, I asked. He doesn't know we have Catherine's testimony yet, doesn't know about her notebook. He thinks all he has to deal with is a hysterical nun and a hermit. He'll be confident, overconfident. Wade started pacing the plan, forming as he spoke. We let words slip that I'm keeping Sister Claire safe, but that I'm not sure I believe her story, that I need more time to investigate. We set up a meeting, just me and him, neutral ground. He'll think he can talk his way out of it, use his influence, maybe even try to take Claire by force. And when he does, when he shows his true colors, when he commits to action that proves his guilt, we arrest him, with witnesses, with evidence, with his own words condemning him. That's risky, I said, real risky. You have a better idea. I thought about it. About 8 years of playing it safe, of waiting and watching instead of acting. No, I admitted, but I'm coming with you, and I'm bringing the Winchester. Wade smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. I was hoping you'd say that. The railroad depot sat at the edge of town where the tracks came in from the east and headed west toward the Ohio border. At night, with no trains due until morning, it was deserted. Just empty platform and dark windows and the water tower looming against the star-filled sky like a sentinel. Perfect for an ambush, for either side. I stood on the platform, hands visible, the Winchester slung across my back. The Colt was in my belt, but not drawn. Wade wanted this to look like a meeting, not a fight, at least at first. In the shadows around the depot, Wade and 3 deputies waited, hidden behind stacked cargo and in the water tower and behind the ticket office. 4 men total watching my back. Old Jake Stone had taught me one thing worth remembering. Never go into a fight alone if you can help it. The moon was 3/4 full, giving enough light to see, but leaving plenty of shadows for men to hide in. A cool breeze came up from the river carrying the smell of water and coal smoke. Then I heard them. Horses. 6 riders came from the north, moving slow and deliberate. Stopped at the edge of the depot, still mounted, forming a line like cavalry preparing to charge. One man dismounted, walked forward into the lamplight with the confidence of someone who'd never had reason to fear anything. Father Nathaniel Blackwood. I'd never seen him before, but I'd know him anywhere from Jake's description. Handsome in a cold way, all sharp angles and calculating eyes. Maybe 40, built lean and tall, wearing his priest's cassock even now, the black cloth making him a shadow within shadows. His hands were folded in front of him in an attitude of prayer, the very picture of piety. But his eyes, those were the eyes of a man who'd let 5 miners die in darkness and walked away counting stolen coins. Mr. Hewitt, his voice was smooth as oil, educated. The kind of voice that was used to being listened to. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I hope we can resolve this unfortunate situation without further unpleasantness. What situation would that be? Sister Claire is a troubled woman. Unwell. She needs care, not encouragement in her delusions. I've come to take her home where she can receive proper treatment. That's so. I understand she's told you stories about me, about theft and corruption. I assure you these are fantasies brought on by mental illness. The poor woman has lost touch with reality. She seems plenty sane to me. Then she's a very good actress, or perhaps she's deceived you as she tried to deceive me. He took a step closer. His men stayed mounted, but their hands drifted toward weapons. The ledger she stole belongs to the church. It contains private financial records that she had no right to see, and certainly no right to remove from church property. The ledger shows you've been stealing timber from federal land, selling it for profit, using the church as a cover for crime. Nathaniel's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Bold accusations from a hermit and a disturbed nun. Do you really think anyone will believe you over me? I have friends in this state, Mr. Hewitt. Important friends, senators, businessmen. The governor himself has dined at my table. And I have the law. Marshal Wade is federal. Can't be bought by your friends. Marshal Wade is a practical man. He understands how the world works. Understands that some battles aren't worth fighting. You're wrong about that. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, a dangerous one. Stand aside, let me take Sister Claire, and I promise you can return to your mountain cabin and live out your days in peace. Can't do that. Then you force my hand. He gestured behind him. 2 of his men dismounted, dragged something between them. Someone. Deputy Hayes. Face bloody, hands tied. He'd been beaten. Badly. One eye swollen shut, lips split, blood running from his nose. I found this young man sneaking around my abbey yesterday, Nathaniel said conversationally. Asking questions, snooping where he had no business. I'm guessing Marshal Wade sent him to gather evidence. He walked over to Hayes, put a hand on the young deputy's shoulder with false gentleness. So here's my offer. Give me the ledger. Give me Sister Claire. Give me your silence. And I'll release this man unharmed. Refuse and he dies. Right here, right now. From the shadows, Wade's voice rang out. You're under arrest, Father Nathaniel Blackwood. For theft, for corruption of officials, for kidnapping a federal officer. Nathaniel's mask of calm cracked. Just for a second, but I saw real fear flicker across his face. Then it hardened into cold rage. You think you can arrest me? You have no idea what you're dealing with, no idea who I am, what I'm capable of. I know exactly what you are, Wade called back. You're Nathan Black, the boy who let 5 men die in a mine rather than risk himself to save them. The thief who stole from dying men. Jake Stone told us everything. For the first time, Nathaniel looked truly rattled. Jake Stone is a mad old fool living in the wilderness. Maybe, but his story matches what we found, matches what Catherine Hewitt witnessed, matches what Sister Claire discovered. Catherine Hewitt. Nathaniel spat the name like poison. That meddling woman. I should have dealt with her months ago when she started asking questions. The words hung in the air. An admission. Clear. Undeniable. Wade stepped out of the shadows, Winchester leveled. That's what I needed to hear. You're under arrest. Tell your men to stand down. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife edge. Nathaniel could surrender. His men could lay down their weapons. This could end without more violence. Then he smiled, cold, vicious. I don't think so. He stepped behind Hayes, pulled a small knife from somewhere in his robes, held it to the deputy's throat. I walk away free or he dies. Your choice, Marshal. That's when everything exploded into chaos. Nathaniel's men drew weapons, opened fire toward where Wade's voice had come from. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The crack of gunfire echoed off the depot buildings. I dove behind a cargo crate as bullets chewed into the wood above my head. Brought the Winchester up, found a target fired. One of Nathaniel's men cried out and went down. Wade and his deputies returned fire from their positions. The sound was deafening. Horses screaming, men shouting, glass shattering as stray bullets hit the depot windows. Through the smoke and chaos, I saw Nathaniel running, not toward his men, toward the depot building itself. Toward the side door, trying to escape in the confusion. I left the cover of the crate and went after him. Into the depot, dark inside except for moonlight through the windows. My eyes hadn't adjusted yet, couldn't see clearly, just shapes and shadows. Something swung at my head. I ducked, but not fast enough. A piece of wood metal bar, something heavy, caught me across the shoulder, sent the Winchester flying from my hands, clattering away into darkness. Nathaniel came at me in a rush. We went down together, rolling across the floor. He was younger, faster, but I was stronger. Years of mining and mountain living had built muscle that didn't quit easily. I got on top, pinned him down. It's over. Never. He had a knife, the same one he'd held to Hayes' throat, drove it toward my chest. I caught his wrist, bare, held it back. The blade came closer, inch by inch, my arms shaking with the effort. His face twisted with rage and desperation. The blade touched my shirt, pressed against skin, started to break through. Then the door burst open. Claire stood there with a wooden chair raised over her head. She brought it down on Nathaniel's back with all her strength. He cried out. The knife dropped from his hand. His body went limp beneath me. I rolled off him, gasping. Claire stood over us both, breathing hard, still holding a piece of the broken chair like a weapon. I told you, she said to Nathaniel's groaning form. I'm done running. Outside, the shooting had stopped. Wade's voice called for ceasefire. I dragged Nathaniel to his feet and pushed him through the door back onto the platform. His men were on the ground, disarmed, hands on their heads. 2 wounded but alive. Hayes was free, being tended by one of Wade's deputies. Wade stood in the center of it all, Winchester still smoking. Father Nathaniel Blackwood, he said formally, you're under arrest for theft of federal property, for corruption, for kidnapping a federal officer, for attempted murder of said officer, and for resisting arrest with violence. You have the right to remain silent, though given what I just heard you admit to, I'd say that ship has sailed. Nathaniel looked around at his captured men, at the deputies with weapons drawn, at the blood on the platform, and the futility of further resistance. This isn't over, he said. I have lawyers, I have friends, I'll be out before the week is done. Maybe, Wade agreed, but you'll stand trial.